Who was the greatest British rock guitarist of the 1960s? For my money, there is no competition whatsoever. It was Eric Clapton with Cream. What about the 1970s? Again, it's just my opinion, but for me it's this man, Jimmy Page of Led Zeppelin. In the 1980s, I would say Slash of Guns N' Roses. Did you know he is actually from Stoke-on-Trent and didn't even get American citizenship until 1996? And despite being half American, half British, he actually considers himself Black British. So I'm going to do the same. In the 1990s, the greatest British guitarist was, in my opinion, John Squire. In those decades, those four guitarists, in my opinion, stood head and shoulders above the rest in the British rock and roll guitar scene. And did you know they all have one remarkable thing in common with each other? An absolute mastery of a specific lead guitar solo scale, which I have still to this day never found properly defined or explained in any book, video or article in my entire life. So today, I want to share with you something that it's taken me literally decades to learn. I want to share with you what I believe that solo scale shape is and the rules that govern its use. Now, I will just be clear from the start, this has only come from my personal studies of these four guitarists. And of course, it probably is covered properly in some book somewhere. But whatever that book may have been, as a young guitarist, I couldn't find it. And any books I did read on the subject tended to be totally impenetrable, and I couldn't understand them anyway. But this is my explanation of how those guitarists were able to form such incredible lead guitar lines, solos and riffs. The secret scale used by the greatest lead guitar masters of 4 decades of rock and roll. To explain the secret guitar scale of the British guitar legends properly, we have to start at the beginning. We need to first just cover the basics so that the more complicated stuff later makes sense. So this is the pentatonic box. It's one of the easiest and simplest solo scales for beginning guitarists to learn. And that particular one I just played you works in the key of C, also known as A minor. So, if that scale works in the key of C, we have 7 chords that we can play under it. You need 2 guitarists. You need one to just play some chords, say C, F, A minor, and G. A pretty simple little sequence. And while the first guitarist is strumming those chords, the second one can just make something up using literally any one of those notes from that pentatonic box. And as long as the chords don't deviate from those 7, you literally can't go out of tune. And I'll demo that for you now with a very simple chord sequence just taken from those 7 chords, and I'll noodle something over the top using that basic pentatonic scale. So that's the absolute bottom rung of the ladder, the simplest form of guitar solo. You can take things up a step by simply filling in 5 more notes on that basic scale. So instead of this, we're going to add in 5 new ones. There's a new one, there's a new one, there's a new one, another new one, and there's the last new one. And I'll demo that natural minor shape for you now using exactly the same chords. And for many people, that's as far as they ever go when it comes to improvisation. However, the reality is that playing the major scale or the natural minor scale over those same 7 chords will always pretty much convey the same mood. And I remember I'd only been playing for a few years as a teenager before I was already pretty fluent in lead guitar. I remember working on solos, working on improv, and thinking, is this really it? I was actually 18 years old and on tour with a band when I discovered there was a whole language on the guitar fretboard into which I had barely yet even dipped my toes. I was gigging, I think, somewhere in the Midlands, and during the band's set, an older bloke got up and asked if he could sit in for a song. Our bass player was absolutely rubbish, so I took over on bass. I gave this bloke my guitar and let him take over on the mic so he could sing for one tune. Now, at 18 years old, I was very, very good. The son of 2 music teachers, I had my grade 8 guitar and already 3 years of constant live experience under my belt. I'd been teaching since I was 15. I was a bit of a cocky little thing, but the truth was I rarely met anyone who could challenge me in any way musically. I was pretty smug and self-assured. And before the bloke started playing, in all honesty, I was expecting crap. He asked me if I knew the 12-bar blues in A, which is a very simple 3-chord sequence. I of course said yes, but then he went 1, 2, 3, 4 and launched into my favourite song then and now, Crossroads by Cream. But he didn't play Clapton's solos, he just wailed on lead guitar, making his own stuff up on the spot. But he was using scales and notes and applying rules that I realised all of a sudden that I didn't bloody know. Frankly, he absolutely blew me off the stage. But, weirdly, I actually didn't mind at all because of the size of the discovery I had just made. I realised with excitement that here at last was something actually genuinely new. I had to learn this musical language, whatever the hell it was. And I only had one word available to me as a clue as I set out to solve this mystery. Blues. I knew all the 12 notes and I knew their names. I knew how they functioned in the major scale. What I didn't know was how on earth musicians like Eric Clapton, Jimmy Page, Slash and John Squire were stringing those 12 notes together to produce such an incredible sound. There was some secret key, some formula governing their note choices, a scale, and I needed to figure out what it was. But the internet then was in its absolute infancy and books were no help at all, mostly filled with bewildering jargon designed to impress people who already knew how to play the blues. I was able to figure out scraps from books and articles. Guitar teachers could tell me disjointed pieces of the puzzle, but that was it. There was no clearly articulated explanation anywhere defining this scale and explaining how it worked. So, round about the age of 19, I realised I was going to have to figure this out for myself. And what followed was over 20 years of obsessively listening to the blues, playing the blues, and analysing it. In reality, it actually took me about 10 years to really codify what I believe to be the actual, true blues scale, and not the silly, simplistic crap that they put in the grade books, which you can see on screen right now, but the one that the British guitar legends actually used on their greatest recordings. And also the rules by which it works. So today, I'm going to attempt to explain it to you. And I want to do it in a way that 18-year-old me could have understood if he was watching this video for the first time. I'm going to do my absolute best to keep the language simple and accessible and to avoid jargon and technical terms at every turn. This video is not for people who already understand all the theory. It's for the ones who don't. Most traditional blues just follows a very simple chord sequence called the 12-bar blues, and that chord sequence literally only uses 3 chords. I'll demo that for you now in A. Though other forms of blues develop this and adapt it, this is the fundamental skeleton on which all blues, pretty much, is based. So, how should you play your lead guitar over these chords. There are actually 5 ways you can do it. Level 1, the major scale. You could just do it as if it's a major key using the basic major scale. It's okay, but really it's just more of the same. It sounds very nice and it's not very bluesy at all. Level 2, playing the minor scale over major chords. Many people think this is how you do it. You have the rhythm guitarist playing A major while the lead guitarist solos in A minor. So let's have a listen. I'll play that exact same 12-bar blues sequence in A again, and this time I'll improvise something using the A minor key. It's not bad. In places it's a little more bluesy, but we still haven't really cracked the code yet. So now, at last, we start drawing closer to the bullseye. Level 3 is the hybrid scale. Having established you can't just use the major scale and you can't just use the minor scale, there's nothing left. What do we use then? Well, this is where we finally home in on the real answer, the true blues scale. So we're going to start off with a bog standard major scale. This is A major. And now we have to make 3 changes, 3 adaptations to that scale. The first one is this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That's note 7. We need to move that down 1 fret. So every time we play the scale now, we play the 0, not the 1, so it'll sound like this. Second change, now we have to add a note, and it's this one, the dreaded tritone. So here's the work in progress scale with 1 change note and 1 added note. And lastly, the third and final change we have to make is we have to add 1 more note, and it's this. That's called a minor third. The third note of a major or a minor scale is actually the one that really makes it major or minor, and that's the interesting thing about blues. It contains both notes. It contains the minor third and the major third. So let's play that scale now with the 2 added notes and the 1 changed note. Starting to sound very bluesy. And so, that's it, isn't it? We are at last on the right trail. But we're not finished yet, because there is another rule, and it's one of the most fundamental to true blues and one that many guitarists and guitar teachers don't know. And it's this, level 4, the adaptive hybrid scale. If you remember, as we've already seen in basic soloing, you just find your solo scale shape, and you just stay in it for the whole song, no matter what the chords are doing. As long as the song doesn't change key or the chords don't do anything too far outside the key, you can just stay in that position if you want to for the whole song. Well, here is the last little twist, the last secret rule that most people don't know. In the 12-bar blues, we've got those three chords, A, D and E. To solo using the true blues scale, you have to change key every single time the chord changes. So you can't just stay in that one position for the whole song. If the chord changes, you've got to effectively move to match the chord. It's almost like if you picture bar chords, you can figure out where you should be playing your solo scale from. So when the chord A is playing, you should be here on fret 5. When the chord D is playing, you should be here on fret 10. And when E is playing, here on fret 12 or 0. Both of those are E, so you can play from both positions. The hybrid blues scale should not just sit in one place for the whole song. It has to jump around to follow the chords as if every chord was a key change. And that took me bloody years to figure out. Years and years and years. And now, for some reason, I'm giving that information away to you. So now, let me demo that for you over the 12-bar blues in A. Every time the chord changes, I'm going to physically move up and down the neck just to represent where the chord changes occur and so where the key changes occur in the solo scale. And so, now we move on to the final level, total mastery. You don't really often see the great British lead guitar masters doing what I just did, do you? They don't tend to physically shift every single time there's a chord change. And that's because once you master this, once you really absorb it and know the fretboard back to front, you actually don't need to physically move up and down the neck like I just did. And that's because most of those notes up the neck are actually available in the same position. You've just got to know the notes really, really well. You've got to pretty much know exactly what note is on every single string in every position. What I showed you on step 4 should actually only really be a stepping stone to step 5. You shouldn't really be soloing here, then here, then here. Almost all of those notes are available here. You don't actually have to keep moving, but you do have to know the fretboard inside and out. So now I'm going to solo over the 12-bar blues one more time, but this time I'm going to stay around fret 5, but I am also going to change scale as the chord changes, and this is the secret scale. This is what the masters did. And this is what Eric Clapton, Jimmy Page, Slash and John Squire all have in common. This level of mastery over both the true blues scale and over their guitar fretboards. And what happens once a guitarist reaches that point is all of a sudden they do actually start leaping all over the neck again, but not because they have to get into the right scale shape, but simply because they can, because they want the full range of notes available. When you're learning level 4, you want to train yourself to actually move with the scale so you learn the sound, you get a sense for what notes should come next, what they should sound like. When you're training yourself in level 5, you should then train yourself once more to not move around the neck, but to use all those notes in the same position. But then, when you've mastered level 5, as those 4 guitarists I've mentioned did, you then have the whole neck available to you once again, and you can leap all over the place, not because you have to shift key, but because you want to have access to those higher notes. Eric Clapton was, in my opinion, the greatest of the 4 guitarists we've looked at today. And if you listen to Steppin' Out with the Bluesbreakers or Crossroads by Cream, you can actually hear him moving between every single scale shape suggested in this ladder. He actually opens one of the solos to Crossroads in the major scale, then he moves into the minor scale, then he moves into the hybrid scale everywhere up and down the neck. And to me, Eric Clapton's playing in the 60s represents the absolute limit of what is attainable using this theory and this scale. And so, that's it. If you want to master this, be warned, it is a marathon, not a sprint. Find yourself a 12-bar blues in A backing track you like, sit and noodle for hours. And as you do that, you'll start to gradually develop what's called a lick library, a memorised bunch of solo riffs that you can use in any song you want. Eric Clapton had loads of these solo stock phrases. And the more you do it, you'll gradually develop the ability to get the blistering music you're hearing up here out on the guitar. Very best of luck to all the budding guitar legends out there, and as always, I'll see you next time.